Welcome to the Divergent AF podcast. I'm your host, Selena Thompson, a late diagnosed ADHD mother on a hashtag journey to unapologetic authenticity. Dive into the rabbit hole realness with me as we overshare unfiltered and relatable stories of what neurodivergent life is really like. Lifting the lid on the honest, hilarious, and heartbreaking topics typically confined to our inner monologue. Get ready to feel seen and heard as we ditch the to-do list, the daily planners, but most importantly, the shame. Hello and welcome back to the Divergent AF podcast. I am your host, Selena Thompson. This is episode 11. I thought I would just jump in with a little solo epi. I came up with the topic for this episode after I visited one of my really good friends in Waiheke who's also ADHD, as well as hanging out with another ADHD friend the next day. And basically my weekend was just hanging around my own kind. Why is that? I don't really mean to do that on purpose and discriminate. I don't know about you, but I go through periods of feeling like I'm just the only weirdo out there, or that you're just all alone in this motherfucker. But when you hang out with people that are like-minded, communicate the same way as you, think the same way as you, move the same way as you, and basically just make you feel safe about being your true self, that is the best feeling. So whenever I go through periods of feeling a little bit isolated, a little bit alone, a little bit rejected from the world, I always find that connecting with other neurodivergent people, whether it's on the VMs or on the phone or in person, just really makes you feel like it ain't just you. I don't know about you, but I always knew that I was different. Probably since I ever had consciousness, I always felt really different from other people, but I just didn't know why. And you sure as hell don't talk about that. There's no one else talking about it. You just put up and shut up. But if I could describe to a neurotypical what it really feels like for us, often on a daily basis, would be imagine going to a foreign country, being put into a school where you don't speak the language at all, and you show up wearing the wrong uniform. You show up for book character day, and it's not booked character day. So you're in the wrong clothes, you cannot speak the language, you try and speak the language, but you end up saying something really offensive and insulting by accident. That is the feeling that I probably get more often than not. It's just you're inherently wrong and you're inherently out of place. No matter how hard you try, it's just you don't get there. And after years and years and years of feeling like this, it can really get to someone. And so you're just outcast and you're isolated and you're weird and roll on the rest of your life. So when I get to a point where I feel like it's really getting me down and it's just really getting to me and you just feel really isolated and wrong, I always find that hanging out with people that are just like me just makes you feel safe and connected. And at the end of the day, one of the most important biological needs for any human being is connection and acceptance. When you're neurodivergent, you're kind of on the back foot of that and you're always just trying to catch up to be fully connected to other people. Anyway, when I came away from this weekend thinking about the connections and the time that I had spent with other ADHD women, feeling seen, feeling heard, feeling loved for being yourself, it got me back to thinking about the importance of connection and how everyone needs connection and everyone needs to find people that they can connect with and vice versa. So this idea of the importance of connection for human beings reminded me of a TED Talk that I had watched that I thought was really incredible at changing the perspective on addiction. And if you haven't seen this TED Talk, I will put a link. It's called Everything You Think You Know About Addiction Is Wrong. And it was done by Johann Hari. And in it, he discusses the implications of the experiments and the challenges on conventional views on addiction. So the talk starts off with referencing to the early rat and drug experiments that were conducted in the 1950s and 60s. And so they were designed to explore the effects of addictive substances on behavior. So this is really what conceptualized the view that it is the drugs that make people addicted. You have to remove the drugs. It's nothing to do with the person, it is the drugs. So I'm sure you would have heard of this, but, rats were put in cages and they were given 2 water bottles, one with plain water, one with a drug, either morphine or cocaine, and it showed that the rats got addicted to the drugs and died. So the conclusion was that drugs have a powerful addictive effect, and that addiction was due to the chemical properties of the drugs themselves. So that was very cause and effect. That was the view of drugs. It wasn't until the 1970s where Bruce Alexander and Rat Park came along. And this is what the TED Talk really gets into and breaks down. So Bruce Alexander was a psychologist in the 1970s, and he came along and he looked at the environments that the rats were in. And it's like, well, they're in cages. There's nothing in there. It's boring. But basically, he came into it looking at it in a different way. He looked at it like, well, the cages are boring and there's nothing to do in there. What about if we compare the cages, the boring cage, and we make a rat park, like Rat Disneyland? Now, because I was actually really interested on what this rat park looked like, I had to pause and go look at it. But they built a large housing colony, 200 times the floor area of the cage, 16 to 20 rats, both sexes. They had food, they had balls, they had wheels, they had enough space for getting it on, getting ratchet, having rat chat, basically having the time of their lives at Rat Park. So if you can guess what the results were, the rats that were kept in just the cages, the rat prisons, high levels of addiction and overdose, obviously preferring the drug-laced water over the plain water. But in the Rat Park, where there was enrichment, there was connection, there was room, there was a lot going on, they consumed significantly less of the drug-laced water. It says that they still enjoyed it. I mean, they still enjoyed to have a little party, but they didn't need to overdose on it, So really, the implication of this Rat Park study was that addiction is a complex issue. It's not just about the chemical properties of the drug. It's the social, it's the psychological, it's the environmental factors, rather than just purely a chemical dependency. And I loved watching this talk because it really flipped my perspective on addiction and people that struggle with addictions. I mean, to me, it just feels that when you're isolated, when you're not connected, when you're miserable, when you're not stimulated, you will rely on something to self-soothe, to medicate yourself. So while I was thinking about this Rat Park, the importance of connections and social interactions and stimulation, I suddenly had this little connection form where I thought, well, that's kind of like neurodivergence in a neurotypical world. Basically, the whole framework of today's modern society, where you're expected to go through school, university, or a trade, and stay in a 9-to-5 job, and then have a family, and then be a housewife and have your house in order, and all these normal things are a neurodivergence prison. And what I mean by a neurodivergent prison, I'm meaning it in the way that it's just because that is how our genetics are and that's how we are biologically wired. It's not like someone has come along and has decided to punish us, I hope not, and make this world a prison for us, but it's just the way the shit falls, A normal daily life, the societal expectations that are put on us of what a normal life should be like, how success is defined, how education is set up and defined, the way we learn, everything. It is completely against the grain of how we operate. And it's not our damn fault. We were born this way and we can't change it because we can't meet the ideals of what normal is and how normal should operate. We don't have the same connection to others most of the time. A lot of that is due to our different communication styles and how our communication styles are not really as accepted as normal or a type of normal. So we don't have the connection. Going back to what I said, that is why I went and hung out with ADHD women on the weekend, because I was craving that connection and the social interactions, because you can feel so disconnected from normal life and from neurotypicals when everything you do, say, eat, not eat, forget, is wrong. So for me, I can see the connection between neurodivergence, ADHD, and things like addiction or alcoholism or impulsive spending or ruining your life from impulsive actions, because we are in a system that does not feed our need for dopamine. And this is all a really invisible process. I can see how that can turn into self-soothing, just like the rats in the cage. Impulsiveness, bad spending habits, bad decisions, addictions, hospitalizations, overdoses, jail time, basically being the burdens of society because you are frantically trying to find something. So if you have felt all of your life that you are just inherently wrong, that you will never meet the expectations or the standards of what normal should be, that's a distressing and isolating place to be in, especially if you don't have other friends or other connections that are the same as you that you can talk about and share this experience with. Because the only other option to not go through with some of these behaviors, to get that dopamine, get what we are missing and we have a lot lower levels of in our brain by design, by genetics, is hiding, is masking, being miserable, being stagnant, feeling like everything you want to do is forbidden. I really feel that a lot of us neurodivergents are in the wrong rat area. We're in the rat prison. Sometimes we might get over to the rat park, but we probably will offend someone by accident and then we're kicked out and we can't come back for a long time. Where is the factor that even animals on a primal level need to be happy? Social connection and interaction. It's gone. If I were to think about what my ideal rat park would be, it would include things like the acceptance of emotional regulation or having emotional regulation rooms. I would call them reg rooms because I think that's quite catchy. Accepting and normalizing the fact that some of us will always struggle with regulating our emotions, and that's normal. But let's have little areas that we could go to and let it all out instead of cussing out someone and ruining the relationship or getting fired. Different ways of learning, different ways of schooling, identifying differences in children and adults, and realizing that what may work for some people might not work for others, and that doesn't mean you're stupid if you can't sit through a 2-hour lecture and absorb everything. Also acknowledging that none of us are actually meant to be good at everything. I don't know about you, but going through school and even watching my daughter go through school, there's still this real idealization that you should be getting good grades and good marks at every subject. When you go into the workforce, if you want an accountant You want someone that is the best at numbers. You're not going to care if they are amazing at doing art. So why is this hammered home so early on that we should be good at every subject across the board? I don't really get that, and I don't like it. Also, recognizing our unique strengths and what they can bring to the table and the world. Yes, they're different, but I think they're needed. Minimizing some of the faults in us, such as we forgot to do the laundry, or we left the bath running. Go check your bath if you're running a bath, by the way. But I'm just saying that all these little things that are kind of, how could you be so stupid? Let's just minimize all that. Why don't we celebrate the strengths of how we invented this? Now, those are just a few things off the top of my head that I could think of that would transform a neurodivergent rat prison into a rat park. I'm going to try and hold my brain back because this could be a serious creative venture and fantasy once I open it. So I'm going to stop there. But just in wrapping things up, the TED Talk by Johann Hari that highlighted the work that was done in the 1970s of Rat Park really changed my perspective on addictions in general. And I think I have decided to translate it into neurodivergence and also any other kind of minority that feels that the world that they're in is not quite created for them. So they therefore turn to behaviours deemed toxic, destructive, unacceptable, unsavoury, because all they're really trying to do is get entry into Rat Park. And if you can't get entry, you're just going to be tailgating in the car park, aren't you? Tailgating. Pun intended with that one. Thank you for tuning in to episode 11, little solo epi for you. That was just one of my epiphanies that I had over the weekend. Unfortunately, at the moment, I think that human connection and social interactions, one of the basic biological needs of a human being, is really hard for us for a lot of different reasons that I went over. So you're not alone in feeling that you're alone. It's actually really normal. Well, at the moment, I don't see an immediate solution to this mismatch to reconcile the differences between what neurodivergent brains need in life and what neurotypical brains are given in this life. I can only hope that the more that this topic is talked about, is shared, is normalized, that one day, hopefully at least for our kids, they will be in their own little rat park. Thanks for tuning in to episode 11 and rat you later.